it is easy to get lost in it, or like, what do you say, disconnect with clothing. And clothing practice is a way we negotiate with our selfhood and express emotions.
Hi listeners, today the first episode of Moral Shame Talks, named Disconnecting Clothes, and today is here with me, Chloe. Hi, welcome Chloe, thank you.
Hi Lindy, thank you for inviting me, so exciting.
We're going to explore moral shame and its expressions through the eyes of an MA student fashion strategy with a bachelor's background in psychology. And her interest lies in consumer psychology and regeneration. The former looks into the factors that influence consumers' decision making, while the latter includes non-human perspectives to develop strategies. She believes that the current sustainable approach in the fashion system is still a human-centered design, which aims to reduce the impact on nature instead of co-evolve with it, and therefore Chloe wants to bring a change to the situation by making the voice of nature be heard. Well, to show the focus of this episode, I would like to show you a fragment of the Shame Talks of Thomas.
So you just asked me if I have any items that I'm never wearing. Actually, I do own a pair of leather shoes. I bought them not long before I went vegan. So they are still in good shape, but I never wear them because wearing them makes me feel very uncomfortable.
Why do you feel uncomfortable?
I don't want to wear them because of two reasons. The first reason is that I don't want to spread the idea that wearing the skin of an animal is normal and okay. And second, because I prefer wearing something that reflects who I am and how I'm feeling, and wearing an animal skin would be exactly the opposite.
I believe Thomas's experience is quite familiar amongst consumers that experience moral shame. And it is an experience we can all relate to somehow. Well, not per se with his leather shoes perhaps, but I do think with clothes in general. Because everyone has pieces in their closet that doesn't represent who they are in terms of personal as well as sustainability values. And with these garments, we experience a friction and a disconnection. And this is precisely the expression of the feeling of moral shame. And this is also the focus of this podcast episode. And together with Chloe, we'll discuss these moral shame expressions and find out or try to find out what plays an important part within this disconnection and within this expression. We'll speak about the way we know fashion currently, about knowledge, about disconnection and reconnection. And all this will revolve around the question, how can we make sense of and what can we learn from moral shame through the eyes of an MA fashion strategy student with psychological factors. Well, let's get back to Thomas's fragment. Chloe, why do you believe we can feel disconnected with owning clothes that doesn't represent us?
Well, a lot is possible to happen when you know nothing about yourself or when you are seeking belongingness. So you just follow other people or follow the trend.
And what do you think can be a reason that we know nothing about ourselves?
Well, at least from my cultural background or educational background, we are only encouraged to learn the academic things at school, and we are not encouraged to know our own values at school. And that's the problem. So I just felt I really know nothing about myself. I'm keeping exploring about myself when I start when I start working or when I interact with others.
Yeah, I understand. I also think that's also in my school background, like we had mathematics and geography, but we didn't have any classes on skills or how to know yourself or how to get to know your way of working, because that's personal for everyone, of course. Mm-hmm. Well, you spoke about how following the trend can lead to a disconnection between the wearer and clothes. And this relates to the following fragment of the Shame Talks that I would like to show you. Sarah, what do you experience when you just purchase an item?
I get really excited. I'm really happy.
What do you experience when you purchase an item some time ago?
In the beginning, I really like the item, but after a while, when it's hanging in my closet, then I don't care that much anymore.
And what is then the difference in how you look at the garment?
Because it's not new anymore, and once it's in my closet, it already feels normal again.
Well, the feeling of the new that creates a happy feeling is very common. And I experienced this myself as well with garments, because the items I own for a longer period of time contain another experience and feeling than the items I bought more recently. Of course, this is also really important in fashion, because the ever wanting new is crucial, because we have new collections coming into the store every 2 weeks or even more often. But also the new we want as consumers, as there's always a reason to buy that new dress or buy that new pants or new coat. But this new also makes sure we have huge closets full of unworn clothes. Something that is really important in the experience of moral shame. But I'm wondering, what is the reason for us that we enjoy garments in the beginning and feel happy, but after a while, this feeling slips away?
Well, having something new is already an exciting thing, but the new here means novelty, I guess. And a garment you pick from a second-hand store can also bring the same joy. And it is because the brand's reward system is triggered by novelty and release a neurotransmitter called dopamine, which generates the pleasure feeling and encourage us to search similar reward. Therefore, as consumers, we keep being captured by new products. And I know it must sound very disappointing that our neurotransmitter failed us, but according to researchers, this preference towards novelty was preserved in our genetic heritage because it gave us a survival advantage. For example, exploring new things and inventing novel solutions to the problem, and why the feeling would slip away. Because when we have been exposed to the stimuli for a while, they just don't stimulate us anymore. And if there is no personal attachment exist, and it is easy for you to turn to seek other rewards or the other garments. As you said, new fashion collections are launched very often, and we are distracted by the traps of novelty all the time.
Yeah, and interesting that you mentioned that a secondhand garment can create the same feeling, that this can create dopamine as well. But that also means, for example, when you swap clothes, that's also can generate this feeling. So, yeah, interesting that perhaps we just need another a renewed definition of the word new.
Or feeling create a new self-image.
Yeah.
That's always happens.
All right. And do you think this can play an important role in our disconnection regarding our clothes as well? So that we always want the new. Can this cause a disconnection regarding our clothes as well?
Well, pleasure or joy is one of the factors that influence our clothing practice. And besides novelty, belongingness also contributes to the feeling. And the eagerness to belong to a certain group may lead us want to behave or dress like them, especially in fashion. But it is easy to get lost in it, or like what do you say, disconnect with clothing. And clothing practice is a way we negotiate with our selfhood and express emotions. If we always follow the trend or other people's opinion, we can hardly understand our values and needs. Therefore, we disconnect with not only the garments, but ourselves.
Yeah, interesting that you mentioned that, because, well, in this episode, we're discussing disconnection, but we already see right now that we're not only indeed disconnected with our garments, but also with ourselves as well. I would like to go on to the next fragment of the shame talks. What do you know about the material of the clothes?
I don't go further than reading the care label and seeing the percentages of the fabric. I do know whether a fabric is more natural or more synthetical, but I don't know anything else about fabrics. I do see the mating label as well, but I always question where the materials come from, because I think it differs from the country of production.
And what do you know about the maker/the making process of clothes?
Actually, no, I don't know anything about it.
When I questioned the participants whether they had some ideas on the fabrics or the production processes of clothes, Willemijn's answer was actually very common. So, Chloe, we spoke about a disconnection with our physical garments and also with ourselves. But this fragment shows another disconnection in my eyes as well. The things that lies behind making a garment. And I noticed that the consumer's knowledge was limited about this. Why is it that we know so little about these garments in your view?
Yeah, maybe first, let's think about why we need garments. Yeah, maybe you can share something with me.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, if I think about the practicality of the garments is of course to protect or to hide our naked bodies.
Yeah.
But if I think more about the aesthetics, for example, it's to send messages to other people.
Yeah, so most of them are used for dressing up ourselves and supporting our performance in different kinds of activities or just warming us up, right? And so we put most of our attentions on their appearances and functionalities because they're what we care about. And the manufacturing process and living wage issues among workers don't really have direct influences on the end item, so they're easily neglected. Well, secondly, maybe we can also think about how and where a consumer can get information about them.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
Because in the research I came across that while this information provided by brands is based on loose definitions of sustainability, so the consumer doesn't really get one specific theme or term for this, so everyone can use it quite loosely, and therefore it's also really confusing.
Yeah, and so also from the labels on the garments, we can only tell the material use or care instructions, and further information is not provided, is what you said. And this semester, my generation from Fashion Strategy did a project with the Clean Clothes campaign, and we found that there is no consistent and comprehensive traceability system existing in the garment industry, not to mention the legislation. Yeah, and since most of the fashion brands prefer to conceal the information to evade taking responsibility for the environment and the workers, so the consumer are hard to assess to the reality, let's say.
Yeah, I also really agree on this matter, but could you tell me a bit more about this project? Because I'm really curious, actually.
You mean the Clean Clothes campaign one? Okay,
Yeah.
cool. And Clean Clothes campaign is a global network that helps the garment workers to strive for their rights in different working conditions around the world. And they cooperated with us because they found they failed to attract young people to pay attention on this issue. So they want us to use our own language to communicate with the public. So that's why we visualize all the manufacturing process to help people understand the whole procedure of making clothes and how many hands are involved. And everything was turned into an exhibition. Like it happened in the end of March, and it was quite nice to see how everything was displayed in our ground floor. So not everyone can come to visit due to Corona situation, but they're happy with the results, and it also helped them to learn more about the young generation's perspective, and they would like to use the content in the future to help them to do their campaign. Yeah, that's a very exciting thing.
Yeah, interesting also that you already visualized the process of manufacturing a garment, because I think that a lot of people don't know about. And also interesting that you mention that we need to communicate like for the younger audience, the younger targets. So really communicate at their level. I really find that interesting.
Yeah, because I believe every generation has their own language and has their own strategy to learn new things. So that's what we can do for them.
Yeah, interesting. Well, we spoke about how knowledge on what goes behind making a garment is little, and that we're focusing on the things we care ourselves about, such as aesthetics. And I believe this relates to our buying behavior, and I would like to show you the following fragment. Do you own sustainable garments? So for example, pieces from a sustainable brand, or pieces that you received from friends and family, or bought at a secondhand shop?
Yeah, so I didn't necessarily purchase clothes from a sustainable brand. I mostly buy clothes, for example, at a specific brand that I like, or also at H&M, so it's not sustainable at all.
But do you have the feeling that you should have those sustainable garments?
Yes, because I'm constantly engaged with sustainability on other levels, but regarding my wardrobe, it's something I struggle with. But because it's an important aspect in my day-to-day life, for example with eating, I believe I should apply sustainability to my clothes as well.
Well, I believe this experience of Frank and how sustainability is an important part in his life, but not necessarily in fashion choices or in his fashion choices, is something a lot of people can relate to. But why do you believe this can be hard to implement sustainability regarding fashion choices?
Well, to answer the question, we probably need to define what sustainability is. But I guess we both know it is not a lot easy to do so because the term has been radiated into so many directions, and some brands even use it to sell more products. Well, I personally agree with Patagonia, which uses responsibility to replace the word sustainability, because it indicates that nature shares the same rights as a human.
Yeah, interesting. And I've been thinking about my definition of sustainability, and that actually comes together in the ideas of mud jeans.
Yeah.
And they say having fun without destroying the earth, its resources, and the humans on it, so that future generations can enjoy the earth as much as we do.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I really find this a really nice approach because it's positive, but it also includes the social part, and that is really important to me regarding my fashion choices.
Wow, it's really nice to hear your opinions because for me it's quite hard to give it a definition or expectation because sustainability for me it means the ability of being able to continue over a period of time and
To sustain.
yeah, and I don't know whether I have the right to decide what to sustain or how long should it be sustained.
Yeah.
So that's my struggles. Yeah.
Yeah, I can understand. It is also really quite a hard and complex matter. Definitely.
Yeah, but going back to the question, and so sustainability considerations are seen as a prerequisite rather than a driver of purchasing decisions now for consumers. And they would prefer to buy more sustainable products and would even pay slightly more for them, but seldom make their consumption behavior sustainable. For example, reducing consumption behaviors by reusing or repairing the old products they have already had. And this is the main problem of the fashion choice now, I think.
Yeah, I can agree because when you see a lot on like the news or when you read an article, for example, about sustainable behavior, it's always about buying a more sustainable product.
Yeah, that's a bit ironic.
Yeah, really ironic because it's indeed like you say, we need to change the way we think perhaps as well, like reusing, repairing old products instead of solely being focused on the new again.
Yeah.
Well, Frank mentions the case of eating, and eating is something that gained more attention lately in the context of the sustainability debates. That is because we have more knowledge about certain types of foods. And I believe it's relevant to look at this specific difference between food and fashion. But what is this difference in your view? And do you believe that knowledge plays an important role in the difference between food and fashion?
Well, because we eat food and food directly gets into our body. And so we take it more seriously. Otherwise, we might get diarrhea or may have suffered from some permanent impairment. But on the contrary, when it comes to garment, we don't have such a mindset. And the most important reason is we usually think we won't be influenced by the environment or the garment workers suffering directly or immediately. And so we just put them aside. And yes, I also believe knowledge works in any condition, but the knowledge we're discussing here does not aim to shame anyone or make a hierarchy sanctifying any specific choice. And knowledge here aims to let everyone be more aware of their choice and how their choice would influence others instead.
But it's interesting that you mentioned that food is, coming into our bodies because a lot of people don't know that, for example, while making a garment, there are a lot of pesticides used, for example, with growing cotton. And these pesticides are in our clothes and will come into our body through our skin.
Yeah, that's also true.
Yeah, but a lot of consumers don't know about it. And I'm always wondering, like, what if they know? Will it, make a difference? Will they just like food? Will it make a difference that people are more occupied with buying better products for themselves as health-wise?
Yeah.
I'm not sure at the moment, but it's something I always kept in the back of my mind actually.
Yeah, I guess everyone would rather go nude to really know all the facts. Yeah. Yeah.
All right, then I would like to go on to the following shame talk. Well, I see the garments in your closet and I immediately see that you hang them on color. And is this with a specific reason?
Yeah, so I wear color combinations a lot because I really like it. And therefore I hang my clothing on color because it's very convenient for me that it's easier to find colors that are matching.
And is there a difference in the garments that are hanging on the left or hanging on the right in the amount of times you wear it?
Yeah, so the difference is primarily on color, but I noticed that I wear clothes on the right more often. So those are the black ones, and the white on the left, I wear them less, but yeah, it depends on the season. So I would probably wear more black during the winter season. And I also like to wear the color green because I have an association with nature with the color green, and therefore I really like it.
Well, this example really has an aspect in it that already got my interest a couple of years ago. And it comes to the fore that we dress according to the seasons. And of course, that is because of practicality, as we already discussed, because we cannot wear a summer jacket in the middle of the winter or a ski suit during summer. So we adjust ourselves to whatever we need to live with nature's rhythm. But also the color green is mentioned, and that is exactly where my interest lays. Because green is the color of nature, of course, and it also is, to me, connected to sustainability. But do you think that through the color green, we want to make a connection between us and nature and thereby also between us and sustainability?
Well, it's an interesting question, and I suppose not everyone who designs or wears garments in green connects them with nature or sustainability. But indeed, color has a powerful psychological impact on people's behavior and decisions. And yes, the color green is usually associated with nature, as well as environmental friendliness and freshness. It's a heuristics processing based on our past experiences. And we can also find brands that use green as the main color tone of their logos usually provide eco-friendly products. But whether the product is really eco-friendly is another matter.
Wow, interesting, because that also means that companies can deliberately use the color green to push us into the direction of thinking, oh, hey,
that's
it's
true.
more a sustainable product. Well, this relates to an article I read on the relationship between humans and animals and how we're inextricably connected. But you see also that a lot of animals are visualized on our clothes, such as leopard prints, but also babies having stuffed animals. So I think, or I believe, that we're really looking for this connection between us humans and animals again. But on the other hand, we still eat meat, for example. Doesn't this show that we're actually disconnected with animals? And what is your view on this?
Well, historically, humans not only live with animals, but also live on animals. So the hunting behavior started in ancient times, which was mainly for getting meat and fur to keep them alive and stay warm. And the leopard prints probably also came from the same history. And so we inherit a lot of habits. And they became a problem nowadays because we human creates a hierarchy to manipulate non-human creatures, and they're turned into products that have no right to speak or resist. And gradually, our consumption behaviors break the natural balance in the ecosystem. And I don't really think that this connection can be simply blamed on eating meat, and the main culprit should be the disregard of non-human.
Yeah, and that also relates to the fashion industry, I believe, because also animals are used in the industry, for example, leather. But why do you think it's so important to get this connection back between ourselves and nature and between our clothes and nature?
I like a quote from Bruno Latour very much. And he said, we're not defending nature, we are nature defending itself. So building the connection between self and outside of the self is the key point to influence every decision of purchase. And the awareness of the interrelationship is the beginning of the healing process of the whole system. So to establish a regenerative living environment, we need to include all the stakeholders, human and non-human, in policy making.
Wow, interesting. So that means all the stakeholders are the self and the outside self.
Yeah, like all the human and non-human creatures should be involved in each decision. Yeah, that's very important.
That relates to the following thing, because I came across an H&M shirt that had a bear portrayed on it with the text, "Keep the earth protected and respect nature." So this shows a fashion company that's telling us to keep the earth protected, while in fact they are the ones who are very pollutive. I see it as something very, very paradoxical, and I can relate this to moral shame, because moral shame is a feeling that we perceive as a personal problem. But I also believe it's at the same time a social construct, because we hear a lot of voices in and outside the fashion industry that we need to behave and purchase sustainably. And as consumers, we feel pressure to do so. But if we cannot manage, we feel morally shamed.
Well, shame is a self-conscious emotion that is evoked by self-reflection and self-evaluation. But the cause and formation of the ashamed feeling are conflicting between personal behavior and societal standard. It is a mechanism to restrict one, not to break norms formed by community. Well, in fashion, I think it is nice to have the atmosphere to go green, but stressing on the right focus is also important, which is not asking people to buy more sustainable product, but to be more responsible for their choices.
Well, I think this relates to the second thing that this shirt actually shows me, and that is how disconnected we are with the things we buy, because we approach clothes solely as an economic product. So this way, it only makes sure we know clothes through consuming. So we take the animals or the text, for example, on the H&M shirt, completely out of its context, which makes sure it becomes meaningless. But on the other hand, by placing it on shirts, I have the feeling that they want to make a connection between ourselves, our clothes, animals, nature, but also sustainability. But because we're so focused on consuming a product instead of knowing it through how it's made, who it's made, we're actually really disconnected. Well, how do you feel about this, and what can we do about it?
Yes, I agree. And again, I think the most important and effective solution is being aware of our decisions and ask yourself several questions before purchasing. For example, why we buy the product and how will it influence us or the third party. Well, in your perspective, how does the ideal fashion system look like?
Wow, that's really quite a big question
I
and a
know.
complex question. Well, I find it quite hard to name a concrete ideal world or system, but there are some aspects that are important to me or that I would like to foresee for a new system. And that is first and foremost that the people working in the system are paid and treated fairly. So there's no exploitation as is currently happening right now. And preferably it will be closer to home or even local. So the connection between the garment, the wearer, and the maker will be reshaped, because it can give consumers insights in how clothes are made. Because as we discussed, there's a lack of knowledge here on the part of consumers. And it would be nice that we regain this knowledge and have it as locally as possible. Well, and I would also like to see different dynamics for consumers, so that we don't only know fashion through consuming and buying, but also know fashion in another way that I'm, for example, myself interested in, like what do clothes tell us and what can we see or what can we learn from fashion as a cultural phenomenon. And of course, that the new is not that big and important anymore, but that we're rather focused on what we actually need instead of want. And also, I would like to have no big companies anymore, but that the stores where you buy your clothes or ateliers you buy your clothes at are local. So it creates another bond as well between the sellers and the consumers.
Yeah.
Well, I'm curious on your view about this. What would be your ideal system?
Well, you made me want to live in your fashion world because I agree most of them. And for me, I think it's important. It's always important in fashion that they can help their consumers or their wearer to be confident about themselves. And I think we really need to work more on that because that's the main value of fashion. Like help you to know yourself more and help you to be yourself instead of just following others. And I also think it's important, just like you, it's important to help the workers and both sides, like the consumers and the sellers, can benefit from the fashion instead of one side is winning and the side is losing something.
Yeah, I totally agree.
But I wonder, like, because it's a how to say paradox between make fashion localized and make everyone enjoy the diversity of fashion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
I'm
understand.
also still thinking about this question. And do you think fast fashion brand can be eco-social friendly one day?
Well, this is something that a lot of people ask me. And also in the shame talks, it came to the fore that someone really likes to purchase at a specific brand because of the style. And they said to me, like, I really would want that company to go into the sustainable direction. But for myself, I'm quite skeptic actually, because on the one hand, if consumers really begin to demand, I believe it can make a change into the more social, eco-friendly scene. But not completely, I believe. And also because the most companies have shareholders, and shareholders demand economic growth. And growth, is connected to selling more, making more money. And I'm not sure whether if you have this structure in your company that you can move into the eco-social friendly scene, because their focus mainly lays on money and economics instead of other stakeholders, as we discussed. But on the other hand, if the consumer demands, I think they will make attempts to go in that direction, but I don't think it will completely reshape the company into a more eco-social friendly scene. What do you think about this?
Well, I don't think they would be completely eco-social friendly, but I wish them to be like that. I also think consumers' decision making and consumers' requirements are very important key factors that influence companies' decision making. So I would still want to encourage everyone again that be more conscious about what you are buying and why you buy it, because only through our strengths we can influence the fashion system and we can change something. Maybe it's not 100% change the system, but at least we can make it change a bit and accumulate this change. We can achieve a great deal and achieve a very important influence. And let's make the better thing come here one day soon. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree that we need to take matter in our own hands, actually, as consumers, to generate change. Well, with these perspectives, I would like to finish this episode of the podcast series. This episode revolved around moral shame and its disconnection, and we question how can we make sense of and what can we learn from moral shame through the eyes of two MA fashion students, actually, but one with psychological factors and the other with a background in fashion production. Well, we noticed throughout the episode that we're quite out of touch with what we wear. We feel disconnected with our clothes as we lack certain knowledge on what the background of a garment is, because we rather focus on pleasure and joy that the garment gives us. But also how sustainability is quite a vague term, so it's hard to know when you behave sustainably or not. And how we're focused on buying new products instead of reusing, for example. It shows how moral shame and its disconnection is quite a complex thing. But as you said, Chloe, taking everyone and everything involved into account in your decision making, being aware of your own decisions can make sure this disconnection can be reshaped and reframed into a connection and thereby use moral shame as a positive change maker. So thanks, Chloe.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me.